Welcome to Praxis Journeys, where we explore the paths of today's most influential leaders in education and the real-world strategies they're using to drive lasting change. I'm Vinay Ganti. In each episode, I sit down with the people shaping the future of our schools to talk candidly about the big issues: teacher recruitment, leadership, innovation, school culture, policy, and more. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or advocate, you'll find fresh ideas and actionable insights to inform your own journey and help students thrive. Let's dive in.
Today, Superintendent Mike Lubelfeld shares his extensive experience in K-12 education, discussing the challenges and opportunities of leadership in the field. He emphasizes the importance of collaboration, the impact of AI on education, and the need for educators to adapt to changing demands in the workforce. The discussion also highlights the significance of empowering future leaders, the role of student voice in shaping educational outcomes. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for joining today. Before we dive in, why don't we give you a chance to introduce yourself to our listeners?
All right. So I am a lifelong public educator, about 33 years in the profession, 16 as a superintendent. All have been centered around suburban Chicago. And I have been blessed with incredible teachers who I work with, and administrators and board members. I was a middle school history teacher, and I'm a husband and a father. And just excited to be here.
Great. Well, thank you for being on the show today. Beyond sort of your day job, you've spent a lot of time and energy really sort of thinking about and then sharing, I think, your perspective on what leadership looks like in the K-12 context. We've talked a lot about on this show, and sort of the analogy that I use a lot is that in teaching, you are on an island, but at least it feels, maybe at least it's like more of an archipelago where you can at least see the other islands around you. Whereas once you get to the superintendent level or you get to the top, you probably feel like you're literally on an island in like the middle of the South Pacific with no one around. And sort of maybe we could start there. Sort of talk to me about how your perspective on sort of the solitude or the loneliness that the job sort of in some ways requires, and how you sort of help coach or maybe encourage people to overcome that. Or
It is a really, really good question. And I'm going to start now and then go backwards, if that makes sense, to illustrate this. So I have practiced collaborative leadership, networked leadership, and connected leadership for all 16 years of my superintendency in years past. In my latest book, Leading for Tomorrow's Schools Today, with Nick Polyak, fellow superintendent, one of the parts is called Go Where the Smart People Are. And my point of that is not just a shameless plug, I swear. It's also to share that some of the leadership lessons that Nick and I share and that have really illustrated my journey and that I try to share with other people is that there are really smart people in your local, in your regional, in your statewide, in your national, and in the international community, whether it's education or whether it's AI or it's manufacturing, whatever it might be, government. And I've been blessed with opportunity and connections. Now, let me go backwards. So when I first became a superintendent, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, IASA, the state affiliate of the AASA, created this leadership program called ISAL, Illinois School of Advanced Leadership, and the visionary leadership of Dr. Brent Clark, who's still our executive director, with other folks from around Illinois and Cardinal Stritch University from the Milwaukee area, came together and said, let's help develop these early career superintendents with the knowledge, skills, passion, and awareness that Illinois, in this example, is 102 counties, 7 hours, tip to top, really big, really all this. You're not going to be as successful as you can be if you go it alone or if you stay on that island. Leadership can be lonely because locally I'm an N of 1. And if I choose to live in that, I lose sight of where the smart people are. So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
great. Yeah, I mean, the N of one thing can be very sort of handcuffing, but it's, the flip side of that is you are now sort of responsible for the empowerment or the support of a lot of people under you. So like, how do you sort of think about that when it comes to helping develop that capacity in a superintendent or leaders today, when it comes to actually helping people below them sort of rise to the challenge as well?
So I take great pride in what Nick has penned, the coaching tree, right?
Yep.
We are
Yep.
developing our teachers into teacher leaders, our teacher leaders into administrators, our administrators into mid-level, our mid-level into senior, and the senior to replace us. And part of it is rinse and repeat. And I have been committed to reading voraciously, to learning what other scholars and researchers and other educators, obviously, but also business people and military leaders, how did they inspire teams? How did they motivate teams? How do they get people to do really what we're wired not to do? And that is, in fact, change. And I'm a pretty competitive guy and a pretty passionate guy. And I love helping systems change just a little more than they want to and probably less than they need to, but we get a little better every day. And it's been that compelling drive to develop the talents and capacities in others as mentors have done for me. And by doing that, I think I'm not only helping my own organization, I'm helping the profession.
Yeah, it's like moving beyond our comfort zones, I think is always it's so much easier said than done, right? And then sort of like and I think sort of it's easier to sort of get in there, but then to be willing to sort of stay uncomfortable long enough for the like true change to come out. That's the hard part, right? That's the sort of challenge that we all face. And I think sort of when you look at you mentioned this idea of like looking beyond K-12, looking beyond specific education community specifically, and seeing if there are other best practices or other sort of insights you can bring. Do you have any examples of those maybe that you could sort of call on? You mentioned the military, corporate world, like any ones that you sort of really sort of was like, wow, I need to bring that over to what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'll give you a very, very contemporary and relevant, I think, timely illustration. It's with generative artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
I'm an
I've heard of
aficionado,
you.
a scholar, somewhat really, really motivated by it. And some in the organization are like, wait, tell me more. Others in the organization are like, is something wrong with you? And the answer is yes, of course, to all the questions. But the answer to your question is the World Economic Forum is an international economic indicator group, right? They study indices of economics. So they publish their annual jobs report. And in January of 2025, for example, they published their jobs report, knowing that it was about data that was probably 6 months old. But okay, we get it in January and they come up with the top 10 jobs of 2030. Well, right now, when we're talking about this, 2030 is not that far away. So the top 10 jobs, 7 of them are what I would say are traditional soft skills or meaningful skills that we teach. Creativity, ability to work with others, thoughtfulness, resilience, right? I call it the normal skills. The top 3, though, are AI in and of itself, this whole suite of concept, cybersecurity, and technological literacy, which are really big ones, right? Well, if the World Economic Job Forum is publishing this in 2025, telling me, systems leader, that in 2030, 2/5 of the skills workers need globally are going to change, and I'm providing education here for 3 to 22-year-olds, K
Yeah.
12. What am I doing about it? And here's the deal. I'm going to do a number of things to create the conditions so the adults under my care who support the other adults under their care who support the children are going to be driven by an economic imperative. It isn't my little box of public school leadership. It isn't even my larger box of public school political leader, social leader. It's the world is demanding that our workers have skills. I'm producing conditions that will create the next generation of workers. How do I integrate that? So that's one example of going outside of education per se to drive some of the changes and innovations that we do here because it's for the greater good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really refreshing to hear sort of that approach, which is that, I feel like another one that sort of is hitting K-12 right now is like the changes in demographics, for example, right? But the population sort of is starting to level off, right? But setting aside the diversities part of the demographic shifts, like just the overall numbers are starting to plateau as well. And so I oftentimes feel as though the conversations that we end up having are very myopic and sort of right focused on like the little issues. And sometimes we don't talk about the larger macro forces that are really going to be the things that steamroll us if we're not careful, right? And sort of make it almost look the other conversations feel trite or almost petty in hindsight. And so, to your point, if the entire global economy is going to require people to be AI literate in 10, 15 years from now, not even 10, you're saying 2030, so 5 years from now, right? It almost makes the whole conversation around whether or not we should be teaching AI in schools like a sort of like anachronistic conversation, right? Just to be
Yeah,
perfectly, because it's like, it's not about whether or not we should. It's more about how do we do it and how do we do it as quickly and effectively as possible, because otherwise we risk like not meeting our larger responsibility as educators, which is helping you prepare for your the future, right? And while we might not be able to predict exactly what that future looks like because it's changing so dramatically right now, we are in one of those stages of flux. That is ultimately like the charge of public education. It's the charge of all education, right? Is to help you prepare for a future, and sort of having a clear vision or at least an opinion on what that future may be, and then orienting your curriculum around it is one of the sort of core tenets of teaching, right? To a certain extent.
100%.
Yeah. But that also poses dramatic, I think, anxiety and significant concern, right? So we have a lot of teaching population right now that there isn't a unified sort of opinion on the role of AI. We have a leadership also, I think, who's probably not all on the same page on that. What sort of change management, or what sort of like the analogy I heard earlier today was like the difference in a speedboat and a tugboat, right? So some people, his leadership style is like they're just going to go, and like it doesn't really matter if people are able to keep up with them because they know that eventually like the people will show up. They might be exhausted, but like they'll get there, and the speedboat may not be there by the time they get there. They may have moved on to something else or moved on to another. Versus like the tugboat, they're the ones actually pulling them along. So it's gonna be a lot slower, the change, but they're like committed to keeping everybody along in lockstep. I guess, do you like that analogy? B, do you find yourself falling somewhere along that continuum? How have you managed the change management along the way of something like this? Because this is probably the big, 800-pound question, or the sort of, this is the existential question that we're facing right now, right? How do we
So,
prepare
yeah,
kids for the
so
future?
I'm going to take a stab at this, and I apologize for any folks from the Navy or Marines because I was never in the Navy or Marines. My dad was in the Army, but a good buddy of mine's a Marine. So I'm going to say, keeping with your nautical metaphor, that it's like an aircraft carrier strike group. And I'm not getting
Okay.
violent or anything, but
Yeah,
the
please.
aircraft carrier has with it frigates, destroyers, battleships, possibly submarines, possibly aircraft of about 5 or different types. So it's a huge team effort. So my point with that metaphor is I'm not in a speedboat alone. I'm not in a tugboat being pulled. I'm in a carrier strike group, again, not violent here, because I've got a whole bunch of different teammates with different areas of expertise. And if I don't know how to surveil the area, I'm going to phone a friend in the surveillance airplane and they're going to surveil the area. And if I don't know how to target someone, I'm going to go to the targeter or whatever, the
Yeah.
destroyer there.
You have a fleet. Exactly.
I got
You
a
have an
fleet.
entire fleet.
I got a
Yeah.
team. And my team is going to go forward. Now, I'll share this with you. So, you've got UNESCO that comes up with reporting on education and AI. You've got the People's Republic of China mandating everybody age 4 and up is learning it. You've got the United Arab Emirates, another part of the world, mandating this. You've got 32, I believe, states at the time of this recording in the United States with 32 individual policies, although there's overlaps with it. You've got the President of the United States AI First for America plan. You've got all these things going on. So what do I suggest as a leader, a systems leader? Cut through the noise, the red tape, ignore the politics of it, right? And try to find out what's going on in these companies, organizations, associations, and groups, and look for some common ground. I'm a builder of coalitions. I look for the coalition of the willing, and we're going to go forward. I'm not here to judge whether it's good or bad in terms of a cultural value statement for East, West, North, South. If 800 million people a day or a week going to large language models is good, bad, or otherwise. What I'm going to share with you is report after report after report validates that 10% of humanity is going to a language model. Therefore, as an educator and systems leader, let me find out, what are they going there for? I'm going to go too. And then I can help figure out, how does this make sense in my organization? We have data privacy. We have safeguards for children. We have safeguards for adults. We have literacy, ethics, fluency. We also are not Luddites. We got to embrace it and move forward, because I'm producing the next generation of statesmen and women, civil leaders, civic leaders, engineers, manufacturers. And again, I am committed to creating those conditions. So I got to learn from others, right? And figure it out somehow.
Yeah, it reminds me of I mean, and I hope this doesn't cheapen out everything that you just said, because everything you said is so great. Is it kind of reminds me of the Ted Lasso sort of scene, which is like, be curious, not judgmental, right? Which is
Yeah.
kind of what you're going at, right? It's like, look, 10% of the world is in there, so maybe we shouldn't be so quick to judge, right? I'm not saying I'm going to become a fanboy. I'm not going to like necessarily go over the deep end myself, but there's probably some probably worth it being a little more curious about this and sort of approaching it a little more scientifically with some hypotheses that we want to bear out, some sort of things, and a willingness to be proven wrong over a period of time to eventually get to a point where we are finding some sort of consensus around what actually is, right? Are you seeing that sort of uh orientation towards AI, or like at least an openness towards AI starting to sort of permeate how you all are looking at things like hiring, and sort of like with teachers or leaders or other people? Like, is that something that's been you're all starting to explicitly discuss at the HR level, which is like, look, we really want anybody we're bringing to the organization at least needs to have that curiosity about AI. They can't be sort of, is that a conversation that's happening right now, or?
It's an excellent question. That explicit level of discrete conversation is not yet happening. What I will share with you, data that I collected last year in my system here in the school district with the help of a research arm, a Hanover Research. We studied all of our employees twice. First survey, 50 people voluntarily took it. We've got about 500 employees. Second survey, about 7 months later, about 150 people took it, which was really cool. That's a big turnout. Of the 150 people who took it, mostly teachers, 85% indicated the usage level of artificial intelligence to support their work, teaching and learning, 2 to 4 times per week to daily. And about 25 people out of the 156 who took it said they don't use it at all. So the indication last year is there is prolific saturation of usage. In our school district, we've got, values and mission and vision. We're looking to create kind, compassionate, innovative, and talented people. I would argue that anybody that's not aware of generative AI isn't going to be in that group. And I would hope that people are at least willing to try it and see what it could do for them as an adult, or what it can do for our children. But we're not discreetly keeping somebody in or out based on that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. As I asked the question, I was like, you know what, that sounds borderline discriminatory, so maybe we don't want to do that. But my job on this show is to ask, hopefully, curious questions that drive curiosity and insight and introspection. So I definitely am not responsible for setting HR policies, and nor should I be. But it's the sort of, you mentioned sort of the usage rates in your district. One of the things that we are starting to explore at ETS a lot more on is AI. Like, if you start to walk down the path and the logic that AI is actually a skill, learning how to use these tools effectively is a skill, then there needs to be some level of trusted assessments around AI to help people understand where they actually are today. So that way we can sort of help them move up that sort of formative learning pathway to like actually become AI proficient, eventually sort of maybe an expert, or be seen as a subject matter expert in this skill set within their community, within their district. We're actually, I think maybe if you were at Princeton a month or so ago, and you saw maybe a preview of some of the tools that we're starting to pilot there called Adapt AI, and how we're we're looking to sort of actually adapt that to the district context. So, and I guess, how are you all thinking about that side of things, which is like the professional development, the sort of training, the upskilling of people around AI?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was able to get a sneak peek. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but it was really something that was compelling, and I would love to actually use it to help assess paraeducators and educators here in the great state of Illinois, but also all over the world, because I think it's timely and relevant. And I also think it's performance based assessment, which has been very elusive in the industry. Well, I will tell you, I may have a unique perspective. I'm a Google GSV fellow in cohort 3, and because of that, and a Generation AI ISTE ASCD fellow. So I'm a glutton for learning and studying, and I've been accepted to these groups. So I'm actually performing arm in arm, side by side action research, but it's really, I'm learning so much more than I think I'm giving to the teachers in my study and the students. So part of the PD literally is very intimate, 1-to-1 and 1-to-3, 1-to-4, working with coaches and teachers. Now, that's not necessarily scalable. The professional learning on scale has been a combination of what we're accustomed to: asynchronous or synchronous web-based training. There's a degree of self-paced online courses that have a hybrid model. And then there's this and yes, but and, right, that I'm going to say, because you've got groups like Teach AI and AI EDU that are coming out offering this stuff. And I follow the bigger associations like you guys and ISTE and everything. The answer is all of the above is what it's going to take, because, like, if we're going to suggest that we're actually creating assessments or administering assessments that are unique, individualized, and differentiated, I want to somehow create a suite of training opportunities that are thusly individualized and differentiated. And it's really hard. So I think together, from industry, researchers, and practitioners together, I have optimistic belief that we can make it happen. So right now, I'll call it a potpourri as opposed to a hodgepodge, but it's probably a little bit of both.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Uh, from the way you're describing it, it's probably no different than the way in which we've been having conversations with PHROs and other talent leaders within districts, which is like the old way is not coming back, right? You're not going to be able to find 90% of your graduates from traditional EPPs anymore. You need to take a multi-pronged strategy now to your talent. Same thing when it comes to PD now. It's like you can't sort of just have one flavor of PD anymore, especially for something as potentially disruptive as AI. You need to take a multi-pronged approach to sort of make sure that everyone can get the type of PD that they will benefit from in order to move the needle. So I wouldn't normally ask this question, but I kind of want to put you on the spot just because of the way you think and sort of how, and so please take some time to think about it if you need it. But you know, we've spent a lot of time now talking about AI. Imagine like or someone is in front of you right now who's considering the profession of going into teaching or going into education as a career today. But they're like, you know what? What's the point? 5 years from now, teaching's all going to get automated anyways, or it's all going to be done by chatbots. Like why should I think that teaching is actually going to be a fulfilling or worthwhile profession for me going forward? What would be your response to that? Because I think that's oftentimes like the headline that we see. And I like to believe the answer is more nuanced. I have my own thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear from somebody who's been living and breathing it now for, you know, over almost 2 decades, right? Like, if not longer, like how you sort of think about that.
So I'm going to give you a response with an analogy from a Subaru car dealer. So that may not be what you were expecting.
Love it. No, I love it. Bringing from outside of once again, this is great. This is very on brand for you so far.
So a couple of years ago, my son turned 16 and got his driver's license. And it was around that time that I had leased a Subaru Legacy, just a random, standard, sensible American Japanese car, right? So the car dealership offered a $50 gas card if you went in and had a meeting with the guy that would teach you the technology. So I said, you know what? I'm going to bring my son. He had just gotten his driver's license and he would drive my car, his driving. So I said to the dealer, I said, do me a favor. I'm going to sit in the back seat. I want the gas card. But more importantly, I want to hear your pitch and what you're going to teach my son about this car. Well, I was shocked. I figured it was going to just be stuff that I've known for my, 4 decades of driving. The Subaru Legacy has a ton of generative artificial intelligence tools. You've got blind spot monitor. You've got a collision warning sensor. You've got radar and like sensors that it's a space age vehicle. And you've got all this stuff. And you've got something called autonomous cruise control, which will speed up and slow down from zero going on. And you've got assistive steering. And this Subaru dealer, technician, trainer was teaching my 16-year-old son, who I said, really be open-minded here because this is good stuff. Here was the leadership lesson, because I believe there's leadership everywhere, and it's our job to find it out and tease it out. The leadership lesson was this gentleman said to my son, don't ever exclusively rely on the machine to keep you safe in this vehicle. I'll tell you, it's one of the most technologically advanced computers out here, and it really is designed to protect itself and keep you safe. But you never, ever give up your human intelligence, even though the sensors are more responsive than you, and its sense of self-preservation may be greater than yours if you're distracted. And I may be paraphrasing, but he said, balance the two, the artificial and your human, and you can't go wrong. And I'm going to tell you, I feel the exact same way, educationally speaking, with generative artificial intelligence. Let's understand what the blind spot monitor and emphasize the fact that we do have blind spots. So let's get some help, whether it's from a human, a coach, an accountability partner, or from a generative artificial intelligence, a neural network machine learning, so we can fill in our blind spot and provide a little bit of illumination where there's darkness. So together we can go even further. And that's really what I believe. And I love being put on the spot. It's awesome. Thank you.
Well, no, I appreciate that. No, and I just want to say I'll wrap us up with this last question then. And I really appreciate your time today. I think this has been a really great conversation. You've already answered a lot of what I've wanted for. Maybe let's end with something a little more personal and a little more sort of like casual. What was like the highlight that has happened to you in the last couple of weeks? Just random thing that made you said look for leadership everywhere. Give another example that we can sort of wrap up the show with, that of where you're like, wow, I'm going to bring that back into my office, bring that back into my building, that insight.
So I'm a real advocate for student voice and leveraging agency and authenticity. And I work in the elementary schools, middle schools, and K-5 here in my district. And a real highlight was the other day in an 8th grade classroom where I'm actually working as part of my action research to see if students find generative artificial intelligence even remotely interesting, if they're using it, how they're using it, and why. And the highlight that I want to share with you as we close is I said, hey, students, listen, part of my job is to go to a lot of meetings, right? I'm a guy in a suit. If any of you are remotely interested in amplifying these experiences that we're having together, and it's from start to finish, it's about 10 one-hour lessons, just to give you context. I would love you to be willing to join the technology committee. No pressure. If you don't, you don't. If you do, you do. We have 3 meetings coming up this year. And I'd love for you to be willing to present with me at a couple of AI conferences that I'm doing virtually in January. Well, I have students who on their own have volunteered to work with me. And when I say that that's a highlight, because leadership is everywhere, that's a risk. The students are going to join me with a bunch of other adults in some technology committee making policy, and they're going to come with me and present on some committee, and it's open-ended. I'm really affirmed and heightened and inspired by these 8th graders who are saying, yeah, this guy's okay, a little goofy, but he's okay. I'll join him. So I'm real proud of that. That's a real highlight in the last couple of weeks.
Well, great. Thank you for that. And we'll end there because I think it's hard to do better than that when it comes to feeling good about the future of our society. So thank you again for your time today. I wish you all the best in your future work and endeavors, and look forward to having you on the show again in the future.
Thank you so much. I would love that. Really appreciate this.
Take care.
Well, thanks for listening to Praxis Journeys. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone who'd find this conversation helpful, feel free to share it with them. I'm Vinay Ganti, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep working toward the kind of change our students deserve.